When we have a conditional loop, we don't know ahead of time how many times the action is going to be executed, but a lot of times that's useful information. So if we want to know, we can have our own running count variable that keeps track of how many times the action is executed. So here's an example in which we have a running count, which we're going to initialize to 0. Then I'm going to prompt the user to enter an integer. And here we have the while scanf is equal to 1. So again, the scanf is attempting to read an integer into the location of a variable called inputInt. Now, if the user enters an integer and the scanf function is able to successfully read the integer into this variable, then the scanf function will return 1. The condition will be true, so we'll execute the action of the while loop and we'll echo print you entered A and the value that the user entered. We'll add 1 to our running count, so now count would be 1, and we'll prompt the user again to enter an integer. So that will send control up to the top to the condition, where once again the scanf function is attempting to read an integer into the location of the variable inputInt. So if the user enters a second integer and the scanf is therefore successful, the scanf function will return 1, and again we'll execute the action. We'll echo print what the user entered, we'll add 1 to count, so count would now be 2, and we prompt again to enter an integer. And we keep going as long as the user's typing in integers, and therefore the scanf function is able to read these integers into the variable inputInt, and the scanf function will keep returning 1. So when the user finally does not enter an integer and the scanf function returns 0 because it's able to successfully read 0 things in, that will get us out of the loop and will print the value of count you entered and then however many integers. So since this is a while loop, it's possible that we will not execute the action at all. The very first time we prompt the user for an integer, if the user does not type in an integer, then we will not execute the action of the while loop, and instead it will come down here and print you entered 0 integers. We could also do basically the same code using a do-while loop rather than a while loop, but that's only going to happen if we want to force the action to be executed at least once. So the advantage of the while loop is that if the user doesn't enter any integers, we just say that the count was 0. Whereas with the do while, it would force the action to take place at least once.